Welcome to the Next Step Recovery podcast. We call this More Than Recovery because addiction is so much more than just getting clean from our addictions, our strongholds. It's really finding our purpose in life, and that's what we're here for each and every day. I like to say that we have three purposes here at the Next Step Recovery podcast. The first purpose is to encourage people, to encourage those who are struggling in their addiction, or just in life. It doesn't have to be an addiction, it could be anything. So we want to encourage you. Number two, we want to educate you. We want to help you help other people. We want to help you help others. And then finally, we want to expand our reach. We want to expand our impact. We want to expand our partners. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to a great show. All right. Hey, welcome. We are so glad you're with us today for our very first More Than Recovery podcast, produced by Next Step Recovery Ministries. And the purpose of our podcast is to, number one, is to encourage people who are in recovery, who are struggling with addictions, strongholds, things in their lives that are just not going right. And it doesn't necessarily have to be addictions. It can be anything that we're dealing with. So our primary purpose here is to encourage you. Our second purpose here today is to educate the public, to educate people on how they can help those who are struggling in addiction, struggling with those just difficult issues of life right now. And our world right now is crazy, and there's just a lot of things that a lot of people are dealing with. And then thirdly, our third purpose here today is to expand our reach, to expand those who could be potential partners for Next Step Recovery Ministries, those perhaps who've never heard of us, and that in some way or another, we can be just a partner with you in whichever way you need us to be that partner. So I'm Todd Robinson, and I am the Executive Director of the Next Step Recovery Ministries here in Middle Georgia. It's a rainy day. We are at my home, so welcome into our home today. And my very first guest, since we're going to do our first podcast from our home, is going to obviously be my wife. And you may be asking, well, has your wife been struggling with an addiction, or has she been in an addiction, or has she had some traumatic experience in her life that has brought her to be your first guest today? And I would probably say we all have had struggles in our life, but certainly she does not come from a background of severe addiction. But her and I together over the past 20 years have had the opportunity to pour into the lives of people. And she's been by my side the whole time and has been a great supporter. We have cried together. We have laughed together. We have seen great victories together. And we have seen people who just didn't make it. And we continue to pray for them. So my wife, Cecilia, will be my first guest today. And as I introduce her, I'm going to kind of give her a chance right now to say hello. And I'm going to ask her some questions here today, and then we'll go from there. So Cecilia, if you don't mind, just speak into the microphone and say hello to everybody out there in podcast land. And
hello, podcast land.
All right. She's not going to say much. She is full-time real estate. And so she's busy. So I told her I would not keep her long today. I would be quick with her, brief with her, ask her these questions, and just let her share her heart around the things that she has seen. Probably I'm in the battle day to day. She's in the support role out there cheering us on a lot of times. But she sees things a lot of times. And I can think of one specific time, and I'm going to look at you. I've got the camera here and I'm looking at you. And there is a man who has been in our ministry now for 3 years. He came to us back in 2020 out of jail, 55 years old. And about a year and a half ago, I had Cecilia go meet with him. He'd been in our program, graduated from our program, but was still a resident of our program and doing some work for me. And I needed Cecilia to meet with him one day on a house that he was working on for me. And she went over to meet with him. And later on that day, his name is Frankie. Frankie told me later on that day, he said, Todd, he goes, the 10 minutes I spent with your wife changed my life. And I said, well, what do you mean by that, Frankie? And he said, well, he goes, I know that if I ever mess up again, I got to face her. And I do not want to face your wife. And so she sometimes she can get done in a 10-minute conversation, what takes me a year to get done. So I do appreciate her so very, very much. But my role on a day-to-day basis is being the executive director of Next Step. And right now I wear a lot of hats. From fundraising to counseling to teaching to doing this podcast, right? This is a new venture for us, and we're just excited about this opportunity to march down this road of podcasting and the video side of it as well. So without any further ado, without any further delay, I'm going to turn to Cecilia here and just give her a few minutes. I've got some questions that I've prepared for her. We shared them the other night here at the house, and so I asked her to prepare her thoughts on that. I don't know if she's done that, so she may be winging some of this as we go along. So, but Cecilia, as I think about these questions, and I don't know if you had a chance to think about them. Over the years, we have worked with I don't know how many men, because specifically Next Step is a men's residential recovery program. And so obviously these men have wives and children. Most of them do. And so my first question to Cecilia was, how have you seen addiction and the decisions that these men have made in their addiction and other issues that go along with addiction, which can be jail time, probation, fines, loss of jobs, different things like that. How have you seen that affect the lives of wives and children over this time?
So thank you. So taking this back a little further than just Next Step, and going back to our years in Reformers Unanimous and the endless amount of or number of people that came there, the wives, some of them come in desperate to fix their husbands, which in turn is in their mind fixing their families. Some of them are might be the issue. Some of these men graduate and go back into an environment that may not be healthy, to include going home to their spouse. And then you've got the ones that we try to direct them to a status of showing some tough love, and that's hard, especially when it's your spouse. But setting the boundaries and being able to really kind of take control of their walk with their families, with the Lord, and in turn, being able to hopefully get across to their husbands that yes, you've been through a program, but now you've got to put into action what you've been taught.
Certainly, right. I don't know if you remember this, but there was it just made me think of this when you said that. There was a couple that came in through the church doors several years ago on a Friday night when we were running our Friday night program to help addicts. And the lady looked at me and she said just that. She looked at me in the face and she said, "Fix my husband." Mm-hmm. And we met together with them for several weeks. And after several weeks of that, she came to me and she said, "I'm realizing that my husband is not the only one that has a problem. Mm-hmm. I have a problem too." And that was when the healing of that man started to take place.
Yeah. I think it's very important for these wives to be in counseling with their husbands, however often that needs to be, right. to be able to, if nothing else, have a plan in place for when their husbands do come out of the program and be able to set some boundaries. And oftentimes that is tough because, the wife may be in addiction herself.
Right. We have a family right now the man's getting ready to graduate from our program. And she's living with her parents with a 1-year-old, just about a 1-year-old. And when he graduates, he's not allowed to go there. And so here they are. He's a month out from graduation and don't know where they're going to live. He doesn't have a vehicle, so we're working through all those issues. Right now, when he's in the program, she has a place to live, but once he graduates and they reunite. So we're trying to work through those issues. These are tough issues when you don't have a place to go. And he's certainly welcome to stay with us as long as it takes. But when when you've been there a year and you're up on graduation, you're ready to go and get back to your wife and your child. And those are tough situations now. And we really have to rely on the Lord. We have to rely on God. We have to do the work, certainly. But at the same time, we got to trust God that He's got the right place at the right time, because there's some very difficult issues that we have to work through with these wives and the children that are involved in these. So,
and I think it hits, Todd, on your overall message of more than recovery.
Yeah,
it's more than just the man recovering or being set free from his addiction. There's so many pieces to it.
Right. Yeah. It's not just about the recovery. It's so much more than that. So let me ask you, and we could talk about this all day long. So my second question for you, how have the men and women we've worked with through the years, how have those men and women we've worked with through the years changed you?
Goodness. I think the backstory, and I don't know how much in depth you want to go into this, what got us into this. It happens to be her birthday today, but Todd's sister, Shelley, without going into a lot of detail, but there was a whole bunch of addiction involved with her, affecting the kids. And one thing to point out is addiction spreads farther than just the addict. It affects the children, it affects the husband, but it even spreads farther than that. And that's, you want to help them so bad. You want to change them so bad. And we jumped in. We jumped in, really not knowing a whole lot, except we had an addictions program at our church. And Todd was getting ready to deploy, and took those materials with him and just kind of jumped in. And through that, we've been able to minister to these people. However, I think for me, it is, we're all, if not for grace, so go we. Addiction does not have any boundaries. We see it in all walks of life. We see it in all income brackets. We see it in all, it doesn't have any boundaries. And because of that, it's changed me in the fact that I've had to kind of, not be Todd's the protector, Todd's the one, but we were very careful growing up what our kids were exposed to. I could go into a whole long story on that, but the way it's changed me is just in knowing that if it weren't for the grace of God, really in all our lives, we could be walking the same paths as many of these that are addicted and going through these struggles, and we just really have to be thankful for that.
We had a conversation on Wednesday night with our pastor at dinner, and I shared a story about my teenage years, and I told him I was not a good kid. I was not a good teenager. I was not a good high school student, and I was going down a very, very wrong road. And I think back to, if certain people hadn't stepped into my life, where would I have gone without somebody stepping in? And sometimes that person who could have stepped into that young man's life at age 12, 13, 14 that didn't, could have made the difference between where that person went, or that young lady in life. Cecilia, I'm going to switch gears on this third question a little bit. And I know the question I gave you, but I'm going to be a little more specific now, because you're right. How has this affected you? How has it affected me? Now, I'll just say this before I move on. I'll never forget when my sister went away. I took her and got her in a 6-month residential program up in Rockford, Illinois. And I went up there that night, and I came back home after spending a night up there. And I came back and I looked at my wife and I said, something's different about that place. And she goes, well, what do you mean by that? I said, when I was there and I sat in the chapel service with them and I heard the singing, I said, there was something different about them. It was like it was real to them. And I said, it was like Jesus was real. I said, because these people had real struggles and they had real problems. Not that we don't, but they were desperate. And this was the last chance they had. And when they sat in that chapel service and when they sang those songs and when they listened to the preaching, it was like it was the last, if they didn't get it, they were going to die. And I came back going, wow, I have not felt that in any church I've ever been in. I had not felt that. And I said, it's just something about it. I can't explain it. And she didn't quite understand it. So I sent her up there about a month later. I sent her up there and she went and she came back and she goes, yeah, it's just different. and it just gets in your DNA, if you will. It gets inside of you. So we were working with a young lady. I say young lady, she's probably a little younger than us. Her name was Kimberly. Mm-hmm. And Kimberly came from a life of addiction. When I met Kimberly, I had to go to court with her one day because she had some charges, and she went before the judge, and the judge asked her if she had an addiction problem, and she said yes. And the judge asked her how long she'd been using, and she looked at the judge. She said, I've been using since I was 5 years old. And the judge looked at her and said, what do you mean by that? She goes, my parents introduced me to hard drugs at age 5. And I don't know any different. And the judge sentenced her to literally, I think it was 2 years of counseling with me. That was the sentence, right? And Kimberly did real well for a while, but some things went bad for Kimberly with her children and housing. One little thing, one little bad move can destroy their lives because. There's so many pieces of their lives that have been that are already weak to begin with, that you remove one little piece of it and it falls apart. Anyway, Kimberly really touched our lives. And the other day I ran into Kim. And anyway, my question to you surrounding that, Cecilia, says, what people who are like Kim, because a lot of times normal church people, normal people on the street who have a good life, who have a good job, and things are going well for them. What would you say to them? Because not everybody is in addiction because they chose to be in addiction. So what would you say to people sometimes who look at people who are homeless on the streets, panhandling? What would you say to somebody to those
I think
people?
we all have a stigma of when we run into somebody on the street that they could have made a better decision, or, this is their fault, or, they're choosing to live like that. And that's not most of the time, not the case. They've come across something in their lives that has put them there. And I think the best way for us to, approach them, or if they approach us, is, I think the first reaction is, in order of helping is to give them money. Well, that's not the healthiest thing to do. We most of us know what's going to happen with that money. I think the best thing you can do is just talk to them. Just carry on the conversation, maybe get a relationship going with them. And just let them know, you're there if they need you. I've done that on occasion. Many times that's not what they're out for. They've got to want to help themselves. But there are resources out there that you can obviously direct them to, and encourage them, pray for them. But I have found that to be the best avenue, just to start up a conversation with them. And if that goes well, maybe just continue to run into them, however that might occur. But I find that to be the best way to do it.
Yeah. To finish the story there about Kim, and you're exactly right, is I ran into Kim the other day, and Kim is not in a good spot. I ran into her on the streets of downtown Macon, and she's walking the streets in prostitution. And I stopped and I saw her, and I said, "Kim, what are you doing?" She came over to my car in tears, and I stopped and obviously rolled down the window. I talked to her, and she said, "Todd, things are not good." And I asked her a few questions, and then I told her, I said, "Kim, whatever you need, we're here to help, but you got to want it." And I gave her $5 against your, and I gave her $5, and I said, "Go get yourself something to drink, something to eat." And it's all I had on me. And I look at Kim, and I certainly, Kim has made some decisions to go back to where she is. She doesn't have to be there, but Kim has a life of, it's all she knows. It's all she's known since she was a baby, since she was a child. It's all she was taught. It's all her brain has been trained to know. So anything different is hard for her to do. And it's very difficult, So I left her. I said, "Kim, we love you. We care for you. You don't have to do this. This is not where God would have you to be. And if you ever want to get out of this situation, you know where we are." And maybe people who are in a situation and you don't know what to do with them. I spoke to a pastor a while back of a small church out in the country in Virginia. And he told me this. He said, "Todd, I don't know what to do." And he said, "I have a lot of men who come into my church." He said, "They come in and they're addicted to heroin." He says, "I meet with them. They get saved, they get baptized, and then they get buried." He said, "I don't know how to work with them. I'm a small church. I don't have the resources to run a big recovery program." And I said, part of what we want to do with these podcasts is to help other people, whether it's a pastor or just a lay person. What do we do? How do we help these people? And you can always go to our website and you can get a hold of us. Our website's www.nextstepmen, men as in ministry, min.org. And you can get a hold of us and email us, make contact with us in any way we can direct you or help you. And you may be in another state, that's fine. But we can start the conversation and perhaps direct you in some places you can go to help people that we all know people. We all know people who are struggling. We all know them. So I thank you so much for being here today for our first podcast. And I thank my wife. She's been a champion, a trooper. She's always been by my side and vice versa. And nobody can do what we do without each other, and none of us can do what we can do without the right people by our side. So remember, this is not just about recovery. We say often, and Cecilia said it, it's about more than recovery. And I will say often that the opposite of addiction is not recovery, it's purpose. And when you find your God-given purpose, you'll have more to live for than chasing the things that we tend to chase. So thank you so much for joining us today.